Okay, so moving on to environmental management as an adjunct to carbon management, and just to provide some sort of a wider context of how, once again, the pieces might fit together for lighting. In this section, I'm going to talk about hazardous substance elimination, what the European Commission are doing with eco-design regulation, because there's a lot we can learn from that, and how that European Commission regulation is likely to flow down to the Australia-New Zealand region, and in particular New Zealand. And also a topic which I'm sure most of us have heard about is the circular economy, but what does that mean? It's a broad concept that's bandied around in headlines, but when you try and nail people down, so what are you going to do about circular economy? How do you implement it? It's much more difficult to find tangible information on that. So just a brief mention of hazardous substance elimination as a co-benefit of energy and carbon reduction programs and processes. This is something, let's say, an added feature that comes along with energy and carbon reductions. There is a convention, international convention called the Minamata Convention on Mercury. It's been in process for a number of years, probably at least 7 or 8 when it was first mooted, and many countries, 150 odd I think, were signatories to the Minamata Convention. Minamata is a place in Japan where the convention was promulgated, and that was about eliminating mercury, hazardous mercury from products, including lighting products. And as mentioned earlier, old school lamps like this, particularly industrial grade ones, do contain mercury. Those mercury levels have trended down over recent years up until the advent of LED. But still mercury is there, and Lighting Council has been working closely with the Ministry for the Environment on lighting mercury reduction as part of New Zealand's obligations under the Minamata Convention. It's being ratified this year as the final phase in 2021, with tangible regulatory interventions about eliminating mercury-based products from our economy. The good news story is, from a lighting perspective, is we didn't really have to do that much at all, because we were heading down that track. The replacement of legacy type mercury-containing lamps to LED has largely done the job for us. But enshrining this in the regulatory framework is something that Lighting Council has been working closely with MFE on. So from the legacy technologies, linear fluorescent, compact fluorescent, and HID, which is high intensity discharge, the overall catch-all phrase for industrial type lamps, street lighting lamps of the old order. So here's the takeaway here for this morning. Users of lighting products can calculate and report improvements because they're transitional from legacy technologies to LED will end up with zero mercury. So put that on your list of positive hits if you're an organisation, a government agency, saying it's not just carbon we're reducing, but hazardous substances such as mercury are a co-benefit of our carbon and energy program. So European Commission is the organisation of the 27 member states of the European Commission. Was 28, now Britain is out, it's 27. And the EC has invested huge resources in a range of initiatives, such as inputs to regulations, such as technical standards and advisory groups and things of that nature on energy and carbon for a range of different products, including lighting. And way back in 2009, there was what was called eco-design regulation that came in as mandatory requirements in the European Commission for all product manufacturers, marketers, sellers, and resellers. And there were 3 initiatives in that: ROS, REACH, and WE. Restriction of hazardous substances, restriction of chemical substances, and waste for electrical and electronic equipment. Bit of a mouthful, those acronyms, but essentially the second two were management programs, and the first one was a a product design requirements for minimization of hazardous substances such as mercury, cadmium, lead, and a few other nasty things like that. So over the years, ROS has become a de facto international accepted norm. It's not a standard, it's not a regulation internationally, but all quality suppliers of quality products worldwide generally adopt ROS as their benchmark for minimization of hazardous substances. So we've had 3 regulations there internationally which have had influences in different parts of the world. But what's coming up is a new European Commission regulation called the Single Lighting Regulation. It's a bit of a strange name, the SLR, and it's coming in September of this year, 2021, and a second tranche in September 2023. So it's here and now as far as European designers of products, manufacturers are concerned, and it covers all aspects of lighting: lamps, luminaires, sensors, control equipment, control devices, etc., etc. So the SLR, Single Lighting Regulation, includes the 3 historic regulations and 2 new ones, energy efficiency and circular economy. So we're going to hear a lot about the SLR in New Zealand from sort of now on, because it's likely to be a very strong influence on the activity of certainly the lighting industry, lighting designers, lighting suppliers, and lighting buyers and users in New Zealand. So what are the implications for New Zealand? The impending regulation from an organisation called E3, the Equipment Energy Efficiency Program. It's a joint Australia-New Zealand initiative out of Canberra and Wellington. Canberra is an organisation called DISA, the Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources. Bit of a mouthful. And ECA in New Zealand, and essentially they are the sort of the mirror organisations of each other and across Australia and New Zealand. And the E3 program is nothing new, and it's administered and implemented a mandatory program in New Zealand for many years, 20-something I think, called MEPS, Minimum Energy Performance Standard, for lamps and control gear. Certain types of lamps, linear fluorescent, compact fluorescent, and control gear devices, electronic and electromagnetic, about the minimum energy performance that these things are required to perform too. So this is an evolution of MEPS from analog through to digital, and this will be infused sort of over the next few years. So lighting suppliers, users, designers and buyers need to be aware of the implications of this initiative. So initially, it will, the E3 digital program, LED program, is focusing on LED lamps only, and then luminaires are likely to follow later. So there has been a new standard published in 2021, about 3 months ago, ASNZS 5341, which is a compendium of international standards from the IEC, ISO and similar, under the banner of an ASNZS standard. It was an excellent example of collaboration between industry, government and NGOs. ECA were much involved with specialist expertise and governance expertise, and Lighting Council was much involved. I was on that committee for about 1.5 years before publication of that, and it's been an excellent success story of progress of a tangible nature. But later, what's coming through is product circular economy and materials efficiency requirements. This is very much a here and now issue in Europe. With Australia and New Zealand, it's still a little bit out there, so I don't want to speak too soon about that, but simply to flag that this is likely to come to Australia and New Zealand as some sort of regulatory intervention, but it is very much part of the European world in a mandatory sense as of whenever September is, 4 months' time. And we need to understand it, because it's not just about it being mandatory in Europe, but international supply chains are aligning to supply the European market, which is in effect the world market. So we will get SLR compliant products in New Zealand, whether we like it or not, understand it or not. So better to understand it than not. So circular economy in practice, what does it mean? This is a diagram taken from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is an NGO based in the UK. Ellen MacArthur is and was a round-the-world yachtswoman, solo round-the-world yachtswoman, and after her excursions around the world, she was struck with the amount of pollution in our oceans, plastic and other man-made materials, and said something needs to be done. So she set up this foundation about 12 years ago, and it's become one of the prime go-to organizations for information about good, practical, and sensible and economic information and techniques for industry, buyers, consumers to come to grips with practical environmental aspects, and to build it into their everyday work. So this is called the butterfly diagram because it looks like a butterfly. The green stuff, the green diagram part is about the green stuff, about the natural world, and this is the manufactured man-made world over here, finite materials and renewable materials. We're interested in this part of it here, but it pays to understand what the overall aspects are about. So it's basically materials inputs here, components input, going through the various stages and coming out as end of life in some form or other. And the circles, as in the circular economy, are the various bits that come out here. Sharing, maintenance, reusing, refurbishment, recycling, and finally coming out as non-recyclable parts. So getting down to the essence of it, as far as lighting is concerned, this diagram represents the circular economy for lighting. We're extracting materials, we're making components, we're manufacturing them into products, we're distributing them, the user is using them, and they end up to some extent incineration or landfill, and hopefully that's a very small part of that. And we have these circles, these circular aspects here: servicing, refurbishing, parts harvesting, and recycling. And we hope that we just don't have one linear life. There's the linear economy, and the circular economy is about circling back at these various levels with interventions that actually extend the life of the product and reduce its overall carbon and environmental impact. So in essence, for lighting, what we want to do with these four things: extend the lifetime of the luminaires. We want to be able to remanufacture the product, if possible, at the end of the first life. And this concept of life is not just one life. It might have first life, second life, etc., refurbished and remanufactured products. And also parts harvesting, to recover or reuse key components, to use them again in remanufactured, warranted, and verified products, and recycle materials at the eventual end of life for what is left. What are the influences of sustainable outcomes? Product performance, product longevity, and here's a concept here which we'll be hearing a whole lot more of in future: repairable, replaceable, upgradable components. That tends to be known as materials efficiency, and it's really eking out way more life from the pieces of hardware that we put into the world and into the environment: the plastics, the metals, the materials. And at end of life, we design a product for easy end-of-life treatment. And end-of-life treatment means disassembly, separating the components: aluminium, copper, steel, plastic A, plastic B, easily. And at the moment, many of our products, that cannot happen, and engineering techniques such as gluing, bonding, staking, riveting, all those sorts of things really preclude against effective end-of-life recycling. So there are some new European standards that have just been published, helping us to get some guidance in these areas. It's called the EN 4555X series, and there's 8 standards and 1 technical report on terms and definitions, produced by Senelec, which is the European equivalent of the ISO and the IEC. They've had lots of funding and input from the European Commission, under a directive, as they call them, and there's been a massive amount of brain power, time, energy, developing these series of standards which are now available internationally to anyone, not just people in the European Union area. And they include things: durability, the ability to remanufacture, ability to repair, reuse, upgrade, recyclability, recovery, proportion of used components, declaration, and information on materials efficiency. So I hasten to add, these are not aspirational documents. These are not ideology. They're not fluffy documents saying we want to do grand things. This is the real methods, engineering criteria, design criteria, where product designers, manufacturers can actually reconfigure their products with a clean sheet of paper in order to make them much more amenable to better environmental outcomes. These are tools at our disposal in New Zealand. We can grab these and use these. And what's particularly important, and why mentioning it in this forum, is these are ways of buyers stating what they want. Tenders for an office building series of light fittings, a prison or a road or something like that. The procurement parties within a government agency, or private agency, anyone at that, should be and could be and can write requirements into their procurement, asking their suppliers to show how they use reused components, recyclability, recoverability in a tangible, quantified way. Not greenwash, not feel-good stuff, but tangible, measurable, ranking and rateability type outcomes and ranking type outcomes for procurement. So this is out of Europe, now moving currently to ISO and IEC standards to go international. I'm on the standards committee that's doing that as part of the IEC, and then that will flow through to Australia and New Zealand standards so we can officially use them in Australia and New Zealand. But we're not going to wait for that. That's probably 2 or 3 years away, the way things go with standards committees. Use these now is my recommendation in New Zealand for application, procurement, reporting, and improvement of those aspects which affect overall carbon footprints and overall ratings for an organisation. Thank you.